in listen-only mode.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Todd DeCapua. I'm going to be hosting the Performance Engineering SIG Kickoff and Vision for Performance Engineering in 2016. Today is the 12th of January, 2016, and to get started, again, I wanted to introduce, there's a host of folks on the line with me as well today, so myself as well as Petar and Paul. Chris had a family medical emergency that came up. I do not believe he's going to be able to join us today, but we will try to cover some of the information that he's provided. I also wanted to, for those of you who might be new to Vivid worldwide, there are over 82 chapters worldwide right now that operate in local areas. Again, this being a independent user group for HP enterprise products and capabilities. There's also 19 SIGs or special interest groups. There's a number of different areas across the Vivid worldwide website that I would offer all of you to go out and check out. Of course, this is the Performance Engineering SIG. We have a page. There's also webinars that are on demand, slide decks that are available for download. You'll also find a number of forums and blogs, a pretty significant knowledge base, as well as a variety of information on careers and education. So again, I would invite you all to engage more, ask a number of questions within these blogs and forums, as well as in venues like this webinar, and then also being able to connect with other members and leaders, again, all around the world. It's nice that we have local chapters as well as these special interest groups, all servicing you guys as, again, this broader Hewlett-Packard enterprise independent software community. Again, just a very quick view. My name is Todd DeCapua, and I'll have the opportunity to kind of walk us through this session today. Just to briefly give you a little bit on the housekeeping, it is a live session that we're doing today. It is being recorded. All of these recordings are available to all Vivid members. We will also be having a Q&A session towards the end. You should all see in the pane in front of you something that says questions. In that pane is where you can type any questions that you have, and we will be moderating those again towards the end. But as they come up to you, please go ahead and type these into that control panel. We'll see them and be able to get to them. If we do not get to your specific question, we're going to try to take them offline as we normally do, and have them updated and available to you after this webinar. So what is on the agenda for today? There's a few key points that we wanted to cover, starting off with what is the Performance Engineering Special Interest Group and a quick overview. Also provide you with introductions. So the four of us that are participating today are the leaders, and we've kind of reshuffled things and wanted to bring more of a focus for you. Have a bit of a discussion. So we thought it would be a lot of fun if each of us kind of gave you what our definition of performance engineering is or looks like. Also some of the war stories that we've all, I think most of us have lived through them, but give you some of our own personal war stories, and then also some tips for performance engineering. So what is that one thing that we would suggest? And again, there's each of us with our own opinions and experiences, and then at the end we'll do some questions. So I mentioned the four of us at the top. What I wanted to present next is, you know, this performance engineering SIG. So where have we been? This has been a special interest group for almost 3 years now. We've grown from 0 people to almost 6,000 worldwide. And again, it's just amazing to me that the interest and need for something like performance engineering has grown so significantly over the years, and we're thrilled to be able to be a part of it. The current state, again, we're hovering at about 6,000 members. We've been doing a little bit as far as different webinars. We've been doing some online blogs, but again, not as much as we think we should be doing. So in the future, and starting right now, what we're going to be doing is finding these key topics that you're interested in learning about, and we're planning the second Tuesday of every month through calendar year 2016 to bring a new topic of conversation and discussions with you, also bringing in other experts across the industry. But the other part of the whole Vivint Worldwide membership is really how is it that we can share and learn and exchange ideas. So this is number 4. We want to encourage you to get involved. And just as we're presenting some of our stories, we'd love to have you guys present your stories as well. And there's a number of ways that we can do this and provide you with a venue and with a voice. Some of the areas that Hewlett Packard Enterprise is also interested in doing is having more, some local area type events and activities where we could physically get together as well. So please give us that feedback. Let us know what areas you want to get involved in. We always think it's nice to be able to put a face with a name. So, we can go through and do some very brief introductions again. We'll go, basically myself, Petar, and then Paul. Unfortunately, Chris was not able to join us. But again, I am Todd DeCapua. I'm with Hewlett Packard Enterprise. I have been a customer of Mercury and HP since '97. Have also been a partner of HP's for about 5 years when I was with Shunra Software, and then we were acquired by Hewlett Packard Enterprise in April of 2014. And you can see all of us have also put our Twitter handles on here. Petar, I'm going to turn it over to you for a brief introduction.
Yeah, so thanks, Todd. Yes, I'm Petar Puskarich, and wow, I've been, I guess I'd say, a user and purchaser of the product since at least 1997. I think was the first time I came across the tool suite. So I've been doing this for quite some time, and just recently transitioned my career over now to the West Coast for NTT Innovation Institute. So now I'm using the tools on a slightly different way, where now I'm actually actively baking things into the solutions and using the tooling to actually make things better before they're even released, even thought of. So yeah, it's been an interesting transition, but it's been great. So thanks for having me.
And Paul, I don't know if you want to do a brief introduction.
Sure. Thank you, Tom. Paul Shovlin. I work for Checkpoint Technologies, which is an HP partner. I've been with Checkpoint Technologies for over 10 years. Beginning my career at Checkpoint, I was a test director, quality center, admin. So ALM is my primary technical background with the HP tools. The last year and a half, I've been leading a performance testing team at the Department of Veterans Affairs, where we have a great team of experienced performance engineers, and that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Paul. Really appreciate the introduction. And I do have some notes from Chris, so I'm going to go ahead and try to keep his. I'll try to put it in his voice as well as I can. But Chris Trimper is with Independent Health. He's been in quality assurance for the past 9 years, 6 of those being focused on functional automation as well as performance testing. And at Independent Health, he's very active in using LoadRunner, ALM, UFT, all for their testing lifecycle, along with AppPulse Active for production monitoring. So there's an introduction for him. We are going to start off with our first poll of the day. We only have 4 polls through this, but what this does is it helps us get feedback, understand maybe a little bit more how we can tailor our comments as we go through this session, as well as thinking about these future 11 sessions that we're going to have for this calendar year. Hopefully you can see the polling question on your screen. I'll read through the question, some of the answers. So, what you want to do, how do you want to be involved with the Performance Engineering SIG, and then please check all that apply here. So as we are waiting for these to come in, and let's see here. And it looks like, how about we go ahead and close this poll? And we'll take a look at the results that we've got.
Petar or Paul, could you read those results out loud so Todd could see them?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
This is Paul. So we have 66% listener, 47% contributor, 9% leader, and 9% all above.
All right, so it sounds like a majority want to listen and some want to contribute. So I think that's probably what I was expecting, but again, want to always offer that opportunity for the people who want to contribute. Again, feel free to reach out to us. We would love to get you guys involved. We'll find out a little bit more along the way here with these polling questions as to what specifically you would like to do. As we get into these definitions, so what is performance engineering? I'll go ahead and kind of lead off for us, and then we're going to follow with Chris and Paul and then Petar. So I will talk through mine. I'll go ahead and briefly talk through Chris's as well, and then hand it over to you, Paul. But looking at performance engineering, I think the definitions are kind of across the board a bit, but there's four things that I normally look at. I see performance engineering as a continuous process. So it's something that even thinking about it in the early stages, again, I don't care if you're talking about requirements or features or stories, whatever that activity is, it's building performance and building performance engineering into that end-to-end process. It's also significantly a culture. So really, how is it that working not only with your business, but also your technology partners, your ops partners, across that entire organization, how do you adopt this performance engineering culture, and what does that look like? I talked about being built in, whether it's part of the culture or the continuous piece. This performance and performance engineering element has to be built into everything that you are doing across the organization. And lastly, that takes me to my fourth point of it's being throughout. So in the little icon that you can see in front of you is again just a way that I've used to kind of talk through this with organizations as we think about things on the left side of being more of an apps or dev focus, and things on the right being more of an ops or support or maintenance type function. But how is it that these work together? How is it that it's continuous, driving through the focus of the culture, being built in and then throughout the entire cycle? These little bits in this icon can help you to kind of talk through those. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my Chris voice and give you what Chris's perspective was of defining performance engineering. And you can see that he's trying to enhance this common goal of a proper and quality ensured user experience under all circumstances and being made available through performance engineering. So he's laid out his life cycle and has little call outs along the way. These performance considerations being throughout the SDLC. Each level is detailed with this cloud text. So again, how is it that in requirements you're considering performance? As you look at development, what are these testing changes that need to be made? How are we proofing the builds? From an integration perspective, looking at performance and testing these pieces together and across a variety of different sets. Also within independent health, he says he focuses a lot on SOA services at lower levels, and nearing UAT, they're aiming to ensure a proper user experience when under load. The addition of production performance monitoring has also given them the ability to be proactive with any performance-related emergencies. So again, as he's moving through this and defining performance engineering, again, you can see the perspective that he's providing. Paul, I'm going to go ahead and change the slides over to you, and if you want to pick them up, and then when you're done, we'll hand it right over to Petar.
Okay, great. So my definition of performance engineering is from software quality perspective. That's my background. I've been in software quality for over 18 years. So yeah, I'm looking at performance testing. So my definition is determining scalability, what the user experience is, and what can we do to enhance the user experience. So for performance testing, we're looking at stress testing, user ramp-up testing, endurance testing, spike testing, and tool utilization, such as site scope to drill down and determine root causes of what's going on, with the system and what can be done to enhance the infrastructure and the scalability and real user experience. So that's my definition at a high level.
Thank you, Paul. Petar?
Yeah. Let's see when the so there goes the slide switches. Yeah, from my point of view, as I've morphed my career over the last 20 years or so, I'm finding myself taking a more, a higher level view of performance engineering as basically an all-encompassing kind of thing. So we're on the screen here, it's basically it's the professional discipline that ensures that basically any of these solutions are meeting or exceeding the non-functional and the functional requirements. And that's one thing where I think my view has changed probably pretty readily over the last 5 years, going from testing very large enterprise applications into now an even larger enterprise application will be coming to market hopefully sometime within the next year or two. But now it's more on my hands, since it's a smaller shop, to get those right. But one thing I've come across many times is the fact that, well, sometimes things don't work at one thread, and they're expected to be tested at multi-threads of 200 or 300 wide or so. So I think functional and non-functional has to go into that definition of performance engineering, because we're kind of responsible for both, since they never seem to happen at the same time for whatever reason. And as well as saying that, yeah, it's each stage of that SDLC, like as I mentioned before, yeah, performance needs to be baked into that solution. It has to be considered along the path. And then to do that, various tools, methodologies covering everything you're looking at, generally runtime or under test, and looking at those proposed user interactions of the system. So basically, you're looking at dynamic systems, often many times many systems that are all linked together, trying to figure out where those root cause issues are, boiling it all back down to some kind of threading issue or some kind of just even in an Apache conf.d file that isn't wide enough to handle your burst loads, stuff like that. But you're basically covering anything and everything, and it's a pretty big task. That's pretty much my definition there for me.
Great, thank you, Petar. And I guess I'm feeling a little bit remiss with the team in that I didn't cover the methodology that we used in creating this content. So we actually worked separately in creating our own independent content, and then we just kind of folded it all together. So what you've heard is 4 different individuals, which hopefully you could hear a little bit different backgrounds for each of us. And as we're bringing this definition that each of us have individually, I'm actually impressed that there's some significant crossover of what our definitions of performance engineering are. So it's just, there's a lot in the marketplace as far as what it is and how it works and some of the specific details like Petar was just giving. But I, again, wanted to share that methodology is how we pulled that content together. This will take us into our second polling question. Again, Petar, if you can see the results and talk through them after we end that would be great.
Certainly.
So this question is really, has your organization adopted performance engineering practices? I wanted to keep it very simple of yes, we have, or no, we have not. Of course, I wanted to throw the third option in there of what is performance engineering. So maybe your organization is just starting to learn what performance engineering is and what the benefits may be from a business perspective, or competitive advantage, or for your customers, or even just simply for your brand. But again, these are some of the pieces that people start to think about. So again, the very simple question: has your organization adopted performance engineering practices? I'm thinking that we're probably getting a pretty good percentage by now.
Yes. Currently,
Okay.
right now, I get a 83% whopping yes and 17% no, and everyone seems to know what it is.
Excellent. So again, it seems like then from this poll, 83% of the organizations are adopting performance engineering practices. The next part that we're going to jump into are, what are some of our war stories? So again, you'll very quickly see some of these were quite painful. I know Petar, just when I was folding some of the content together, you've got actually one of your quote-unquote winning stories that you've included. The one that I would like to share with everybody is one that takes me back to April of 2006 for my personal story, but it's one that I still have the opportunity to share. And for those of you on the phone, some of you may have heard it or seen me share it before. But this really focuses and hones in on, again, thinking about performance engineering and thinking about the impact that mobile has on your back-end infrastructure. So thinking about it, I try to put this sketch into something that you could take away and use within your organization, or as you share this with other people and help them to understand, what is this and why is it important. So it can be technical. Hopefully the way that I'm going to explain it is rather simple. It's something that I do on the back of a napkin with, anybody from a CXO all the way down to, an analyst, or even in the college and university settings. But first, talking about three different elements. So we've got latency. So latency being the speed of light. Also the percentage of users that are forecasted to be using this mobile application or mobile web site for that matter. And then a percentage of data center utilization today. So the blue items would be things that you would write in together. I've filled them in for us based on where my experience was at the time. So looking at a local area network, I had about 30 milliseconds of latency on average. Then moving into a mobile scenario, it averaged somewhere around 300 milliseconds. And then as we looked at, the percentage of users that we were forecasting to use this mobile application within the first few months, we hoped that we would get somewhere about a 5% adoption within our customer base. And then the percentage of data center utilization today. So this is kind of an overall encompassing number. And again, we were running at about a 65% utilization. So the blue, again, being all those variable inputs. And then as we go and define, so what? Well, the difference between 330 milliseconds is a 10x difference. So we then take that 10x times a 5% of our user base, and we get to 50% increase in utilization. I often have to kind of sit here and share with people that, with this increased latency, you're increasing the delays, which means you're holding open, for example, session IDs longer. That then starts to do some pretty bad things at many different levels within your back-end infrastructure and some of your front-end things like potentially F5s or other front-end tools. So that's the 50% of additional utilization and where that comes from. So again, very simply showing, okay, we had a 65% utilization plus a 50% increased utilization due to the impact of these mobile users on the back end. That now gets us to 115% utilization. So as you can imagine, this does very bad things. This is one of the worst production incidents I've been a part of. But again, you can see that it was a very small percentage of these mobile users. That then opened up a huge opportunity from a performance engineering perspective to come in and understand why this was happening and what we needed to do. So I will kind of take off my Todd hat and I will be putting on my Chris hat to get through his war story. But again, this being one of my personal stories I wanted to share, was as relevant in 2006 as it is today. For Chris, the war story that he wanted to share is really looking at his experience. He mentioned this long road. So, he deemed this term because of the many steps and stages of testing out of a single server instance into a multi. So, again, thinking about what that transition looked like, he gave some very specific examples here in his notes for me to talk through. Being able to test proper garbage collection methods, they were able to emulate the proper production load to allow engineers to then configure and correct the garbage collection configuration for their new environment. This was key, as an improper configuration could have sent servers into starvation mode, making them virtually inaccessible to end users, as well as he highlighted in his notes, this poison data is the data which rarely occurs but can send the system in a downward spiral. So through performance, we can properly emulate and test this. So again, Chris's story, again, I can definitely relate to that experience and how things like performance engineering can go ahead and help with that as well. So next, let's go ahead and hand this over to Paul. You can go ahead and cover your war story.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about something, instead of a past war story, something that a little bit more topical with the holidays and something that we have going on. So over the holidays, a prominent retailer was offering a limited time offer sale. And yeah, so you see the screen. I think most of us have seen this screen at some point or another, and it's something no one ever wants to see, especially if you're a retailer and you have a sale that you're banking a lot on. So this particular retailer, they lost thousands of dollars, not only in missed sales, but in the required research to figure out what happened in the report up to executive management. Now they've come to us, and what we're finding out is that they didn't take a lot of things into consideration, including increasing the number of unique users, new customers. It takes time for the new customers to go through and give their information, hits, throughput to the host servers, etc. As a result, there were increases in customer service calls. We don't know how many of those calls, what percentage were taken, how many dropped, and it's difficult to tell how many customers they've lost, not only for near term, but moving forward in the long term, because a lot of folks, they see the screen and have bad experiences, they don't come back. So what are we going to do? So we're going to help them and look at ramping up number of virtual users against their defined business processes while capturing response times and server statistics. We're going to ask them for past history of their website traffic, if they have data from previous limited time offer sales, look at the number of notification emails that were sent about the sale to their customers. And with Valentine's Day coming up, it's imperative that retailers and companies who've had these experiences, especially this one, that they have everything together and planned and ready to go. Otherwise, they're looking at losing a lot more money, a lot more customers, their jobs, etc. So that's something that I wanted to share with folks today.
It's a great point, Paul, and it's one that if you're just focused in that retailer space, there's so much energy and effort put around things like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, the rest of the holiday shopping season. But there's all kinds of things that are happening. You'd mentioned Valentine's Day coming up. I'm running some studies right now against the top 25 dating websites, thinking that might get a little bit more popular here as we get towards Valentine's Day. I'm also looking at all the flowers businesses and looking at things across their different technology stacks. But I think you bring up a great point, which is this 503 error or any other host of other errors that we never want to see can happen not only during the one peak season that everybody looks at, but there's now so many different sales that are happening, promotions, other activities that it's how is it that we're able as performance engineers to help prepare our organizations for all of these types of events.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. Just this morning, I was having a meeting with our performance engineers, and while we were all dreaming of winning the Powerball tomorrow, got to play to win, folks. The guys, our engineers, were talking about what's the traffic going to be when the winning numbers are announced. So they're going to be going out, and I'm going to make a note tomorrow when the winning numbers are announced to go check out the website just to see what the traffic is like. And one of them wants to go ahead and run some tests against it. But yeah, so there's another example, and I think everyone has heard of the Powerball. And so tomorrow night, I don't know what time. What is it? 11 Eastern there now.
10:59. 10:59 p.m. Eastern.
Okay, so yeah, 11 o'clock tomorrow night. Let's see how that website's performing when we have millions of people going looking for the winning numbers.
Absolutely. So, Petar, speaking of winning, I know you were going to share one of your winning war stories here.
Yeah, when I was going over the deck, y'all have these really, these terror stories of things we've lived through in our careers, and there was a lot of things that changed for me in the last 7 months as I've basically changed careers. But it was one of those really neat things where I've realized that my background has played a huge role as far as going back into software architecture now, and also looking at how do we create new products with all these different pieces of infrastructure that I used to take for granted and I was just testing against and helping do core diagnostics against. And one of the things that stood out was we had a project the last quarter where we worked with Cognito Networks, and they're working on a new IoT platform that happens to scale quite well when I went to do some testing with it. And as NTT Innovation Institute, we chose them to partner with to add on to a new product we're currently building. I can't say too much more of the internals, but it needed to be massively scaled, but also work on some very restricted appliance hardware, which is an interesting set of requirements, because you're taking what normally would run, say, on multiple Amazon Web Instances and trying to shove them down into, say, a 1 gig RAM enabled appliance with limited disk as well. They were really good to work with, and one of the things I think that's helped is the fact that the relationship basically was probably the closest I've had to actually doing real DevOps, even though this was rolled out to actual users. But just the fact that we could get access to source code with them at the same time, with their engineers able to figure out what was going on when we bring up a problem. Also the fact that we were looking at lots of open source stacks across this particular product line. So we're looking at anything from like a MySQL, OpenRabbit, the RabbitMQ message queue systems, their custom application and our custom application going together. It was really, really neat to see our two groups working together very well, instead of what I've experienced in the past, which is where you get a lot of the blame game going back and forth between the different groups, where historically, we'd find something in a Java application, and they'd say, "Oh no, it's not possible to, for this to even happen." It's like, "Well, no, we've got performance tests here that say, yeah, you're limited to, basically 2 things happening simultaneously." That's, it's always someone else's problem, and nothing ever gets fixed. But in this case, we'd have a few things where some was functional and some was non-functional, and that tight integration between the two teams worked extremely well. And the fact that even though there was a problem, it wasn't a blame game, I think was one of the winning strategies there, where it actually came together pretty well. In the process of moving this particular app onto some restricted hardware, so I did some heavy tuning and looking at what's going to be required in the future when we take it even further, around basically the optimization around the OS internals, that application base itself. So there's some Apache stuff, some PHP, and some internal Python coding that's going to need to take a look at even more, but that'll come together. MySQL databases, RabbitMQ. There was some, I believe, well, I think it's between Django and Celery was also used in this solution. So it's a lot of open source things, and the nice part from my engineering side is that there are also a lot of good forums open across these application stacks. So when you're having these weird issues that you're finding, you can actually get some at least decent answers. You know, like everything else, it usually takes 6 or 7 forum dives to find the right answer. But that's part of the game of being an engineer, being in the performance game. Yeah, it's been one of those really, I guess, rewarding projects to be on, to actually see how things work when you have both sides of the fence working together to actually come out with a product that, you know, should work and scale extremely well when we're ready. Yeah, I wish I could say a little bit more exactly what this is, but hopefully within the next year and a half, it'll be ready and we can go forward. But yeah, this is basically my good war story, and maybe sometime down the road I can give you some more examples of some of the negative things from a past life.
Well, thank you, Petar, for that. And I guess I know that we can't dive into this one war story too much, but I think that the one thing for me is, you know, you had mentioned not having the blame game, which was something that was prominent, at least in some of your previous experiences. Yeah. You know, and I keep going back to kind of all of our definitions, but you know, I don't know what was different, you think, in this experience. If you know, kind of stand up and look at the team and say, hey, why was the blame game not happening as much as maybe some of your previous experience? And I know this is totally unrehearsed, but I don't know if that's, you know, something that you've got put your finger on a couple things, or.
Yeah, I'd say in this particular case, I think the difference was the fact that it was on a much smaller scale, where a positive outcome was actually mutually beneficial to everybody that was involved, versus when you have, say, intra-company fighting, to where, because like depending on how different enterprises are set up or whatnot, where you have a performance group that basically is responsible to essentially attack an app and find out why is the baby ugly. But then that usually gets taken back around to application teams to say, oh yeah, it's ugly and it's up to them to fix it. We have no idea how. And then you get this dynamic built where you've got multiple internal teams kind of like hating each other because they're saying, hey, we're calling you that what you're doing is bad. But in this case, it's like, no, we're not saying what you're doing is bad. We're just saying this part's not right, and how fast can you turn it around to fix it so we can move forward? And as long as that dynamic is there, it works really well. So it's not like it's saying that, you know, it's bad and, you know, you need to, you know, go away and come back later. It's more of, okay, it's broken now, but it won't be for long. And you're going to use our product, and you know, we're going to buy your product, or, you know, merge stuff together. You know, it has to work. I think that was the biggest deal there, where it's not, you know, we're not really blaming each other in a negative way. It's more of, let's highlight the problems and get them fixed. Cool.
Again, it's just an area that, you know, as I hear everybody, and again, everybody's got different war stories that we could talk about and share, but it's interesting, you know, what are one or two key learnings that we could pull out of, you know, every one of these, and figure out how we would apply that into our environments. So thank you, Paul. Thank you, Petar, for sharing your war stories. Our third polling question is, would you be willing to contribute your war story? Yes or no? So it's actually a very simple question, but again, we wanted to take a few moments to share our war stories, or at least one of them each, and we would love to, you know, from this community, get more war stories out there, because quite frankly, we think this is a really good way that we can share and learn and just exchange knowledge with each other as a broader independent HPE software community. So take a quick moment there and vote either yes or no, and we will go ahead and see what the results are here. Petar, do you think we have a reasonable sample size?
Oh, yeah. We're at 75% yes and 25% no.
That's great.
So
So,
3/4 is not bad.
Again, I'm just trying to figure out how do we go out and collect those, but I am happy to work across the team to figure that out and bring it in. And again, as we do this monthly, maybe that's one of the things we have is just to highlight somebody's war story or have you guys join us and contribute. So thank you for that. Next, we're going to get into this one tip for performance engineering. So, going through the definitions that each of us have, sharing some of our war stories. I'm often asked, I know we're all often asked, what's one tip you would give me if we're just starting with performance engineering, or, you're partway down the path, you're feeling like things are pretty good. No matter where you are, what's one tip that you would suggest or share? So we're each going to go in and share our own individual tips. The one that I really like to focus on has to do with measuring and sharing the value that you and your teams are delivering to a number of different stakeholders. So I first think about, the organization at a broader level. Also, maybe in your specific organization, maybe you're in the technology teams, or thinking about the business. How is it that, thinking about Petar's example, what does that mean for the NTT Innovation Institute by having something working and have it be high performing, and what does that mean for their business? And ultimately, it comes back to the end user. So, in all of the examples that we shared, again, what is that value that you and your teams are delivering to your end users? Thinking about what frequency you want to be able to communicate these, how you want to communicate it, are all important. Some organizations that I've worked in, we've had results that get delivered at the end of every single build cycle, and be able to show that value that we bring. Other organizations, maybe you on the performance engineering team have to show something like I've got on this chart, which specifically looks at something like ROI. So being able to look at kind of 4 key components here, and if you just look at this chart, you can see A, B, C, and D. So, oftentimes when I would be in an organization and I'm responsible for performance engineering, what are those average number of performance-related production incidents we have a year? How many hours are required to resolve that outage? How many staff are required to resolve that outage? And what's their average hourly labor rate fully loaded, to help me at least understand, what is the size or magnitude of this challenge or problem that I'm facing as that individual? And again, what is the investments that I can be making so that we can have these improvements and ultimately that value that I can bring back to the organization, to the business, and to my end users. So that's my one little tip that I would share. And Chris, his is quite fun. So again, I guess it does play into a bit where I was talking about the continuous aspect, but for Chris, independent health where he is, never stop testing. Keep pushing these boundaries, keep getting more real and live-like, and then always pushing for performance testing on all projects. So in his notes that he sent over to me, he said, I want to highlight being more live-like. So keep analyzing production logs and striving for a real test scenario. So again, leveraging the monitoring capability out of production, being able to bring that back into your pre-production environments, and then just continually pushing this. And again, in his experience, needing to continually push for performance testing on all these projects is another area that he wanted to go ahead and share with us as a tip. So, Paul, I'm going to hand it over to you next.
All right, thank you, Todd. So my tip is, I come, as I mentioned, from software quality background, is to adopt and champion common quality practices for performance engineering. And I found the results to our second poll to be very encouraging. 83% of you responded that yes, you do have performance engineering practices in play. So that's great. But if you're at an organization that doesn't, you often hear comments like, and jokes really, oh, what performance requirements, and people laugh off that they don't have good, solid performance requirements. And I've seen it where it's become acceptable. And as performance engineers, anyone who's worked with performance engineering, it's our job to not allow that to happen. Don't allow it to become acceptable. Become the champion to implement quality practices for your performance engineering. And some of the ways you can do that is to have good and bad examples of performance requirements that each project team, each business unit can have for reference, each quality team. You develop a test plan template that can be used across the organization, and you have your typical test plan sections in there in addition to ones that are specific to performance. You list your performance tests, how many V users you're going to use, what kind of scripts, who the stakeholders are, what their roles are, risks such as having a stable environment, who's going to support the environment, assumptions, expectations, what's in scope, what's out of scope. Exit criteria is always important to have in there. Establish performance test success criteria as part of that as well. If there are differences between your test environment and production, it's important to point out what those are. So these are just some of the things that could go into a performance test plan. My tip is to don't allow your organization to accept that, it's performance, we don't have performance requirements. We're going to performance test. Yeah, we're just going to go ahead and run some scripts, run some load, X number of users. We know that this application typically has this many users, so we're going to run some ramp up tests and tests around that. But no, you want to have performance test plans so all the stakeholders know what to expect, what the goals are, and if those goals have been met. I'll get off my soapbox now.
I'm going to say, Paul, I'm hearing some music in the background. It sounds like, we are the champions and everything else. But, I think your point is very well made and supported in that, we whether you're in the business, you're somewhere in the broader organization, you're an end user, or a customer, it's, what is it that we in the community are doing to champion these common quality practices for performance engineering? And again, is there an expectation? I can tell you, I know you're on your soapbox, Paul, but I can fully appreciate it. I can't tell you how many times I've been a user, maybe on my mobile device, and I get one of those nasty messages. Well, I take a screenshot and I share it with that organization because, as a champion, I don't want that to be the experience for other people like myself. So I know you felt like a soapbox, but you know what, man, I'm right there with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
Petar,
you're doing something about it, that's for sure, Todd. So that's great.
All right.
Petar, what do you have for us today?
Well, I guess I'm going to boil down my one tip here basically is, use your performance testers and your engineers together to their full potential. And that's primarily from, I guess, say a PE manager's point of view or even your department view. Generally, they know what they're doing, and they're usually right, so why not use them and trust what they're saying? That includes coming back to what Paul was saying too about having the test plans and everything. Where I say your use cases for some of these tests that come out can come a lot from, say, your past experience working on different parts of your applications already in the enterprise workflow, or even if you're working on one-offs. A lot of the engineers have worked on the different Java, even Java frameworks, or even down the OS level, in the bytecode emulation layers, that kind of thing. They know some of these tests that you can add into your performance tests to really stress out what happens on these edge cases. That normally, if you just go in with say normal workflow, you're gonna miss. That's one of the big things there. And then say also allow your engineers to have some innovation in what they're doing. Sometimes it's not just only HP tools that are being used, but sometimes some other widgets and gizmos that they come up with can really be used effectively with the actual other regular testing tools. It can save time. It can get around some other, departmental barriers. I've had a few issues with that where certain tool sets were not liked, and had to get a little creative and in order to get the right answer for our users, it was the right thing to do, and just develop those alternative things. To finally get into some of those deep levels. A lot of those, at least from my past experience, primarily actually delved around network-related issues, using some of these alternative tools for that. When you're actually looking really deep into the packets and seeing, oh yeah, why did this timeout on the TCP/IP stack cause this other thing to happen, which then trickles into, oh, why did the server just hang a thread? That kind of thing. And then finally, trust the engineers. The errors that they're reporting out of Load Runner, out of Performance Center, Storm Runner, they are real. They did happen. It's not that, oh yeah, it's a scripting error all the time. That was probably the biggest bane to my career over the last 20 years or so. It's like, yeah, it's always your script's fault. No, usually that script fault is probably I'd say about 2% of the time. The 98% is something else. And then also the engineers that you're working with, do have ideas on how to fix the issues once they see them. So it's always just a report and then forget. Usually just from seeing how a test fails or sometimes succeeds, you can tell why other areas of application are reacting the way they are. So they will have tuning ideas and different fixes in mind that should be looked at. So from a primary thing, just use the individual talent that you have to the fullest capacity, and it makes performance engineering a lot easier. And that's what I have.
Thank you, Petar. And I think the other, kind of tangential, the bit that I pulled away from your opening, dialogue on the tip was, use your performance testers and engineers to their full potential. And then as you went through it, kind of looking at, historically, when you and I and Paul, I'm sure Chris, when we look back over our careers, many of us, at some point came through as a performance tester, but as this has evolved, it's really evolved into more of an engineering practice. And, your first point here, cases can come from anywhere. It's an interesting one because, whether you're using, some of the latest monitoring tools today where you can see what is the workflow, what is the makeup of my end users, what's some of the core, test data that they're looking at. I mean, you can pull a lot of that in, but there's also other areas like, who are your end users? Who are your customers? Are they willing to, hey, here's the net new thing that we're bringing out, but we want to give you the opportunity as one of our super users to touch it first and let them use it and break it and come up with these new use cases. So, again, I think just listening through what you said, it's almost, tangential of, hey, we've come through performance testing, we're now in performance engineering, and, trust those folks, allow for them to, do some innovation, but then also thinking about where is it that these use cases can come from. Thank you for sharing that. We've got our last polling question here, so if you're keeping track, as I'm sure many engineers would, this is polling question number 4. This is specifically looking at, and I had mentioned planning the second Tuesday of every month for the next 11 calendar months. But as we kind of want to make this content that you're interested in, and ultimately you can pick it up and take it and apply it to your organization, and hopefully having you share some of your stories and ideas as well. But what future performance engineering topics would you like to see in our upcoming monthly webinars and presentations and white papers? Please select a couple of these. Thinking about case studies, again, this could be something that you say, hey, you know what, we want to do a quick, 2-page case study, or we would love to present, 2 or 3 slides on something that we recently did, kind of like what Petar did with his NTT example today, or we want to focus more on some of the different tools or core capabilities that are out there, and maybe how people are using them to do performance engineering, the value to the business. This can vary, but I always love to understand, how different performance engineering teams are taking what they do and sharing that with the business of, the value of implementing these practices kind of throughout. Thinking about solution overviews. Again, I know that a number of us have worked together before, but hey, I need a blueprint for how, performance engineering is adopted within an agile environment. Okay, well, let's do a quick solution overview on what that might look like. And then lastly is enablement and education, which is an area that's been near and dear to my heart for quite a while now. But as we talk about things like performance engineering, what type of enablement, what type of education is out there and available? And, with us as a special interest group, in this community, is there more that we can be doing as practitioners to, put more enablement and education out there? So, again, select as many as you want, but looking to get feedback and see a trend as far as where we should be focusing content for the next 11 months. So I'm sure with all that talking, Petar, we've got a good sample size here to pull on. I don't know if you can share with us what you're seeing on the screen.
Yeah, it just popped up, and it looks like the highest one's going to be solution overviews at 30%, then followed closely then by value to business at 22%, and then a two-way tie for enablement, education, and tools at 19%, and then at the bottom, the case studies at 11%.
Excellent.
So people are looking for solutions.
Absolutely. So again, it's an area where there can be a lot of fun. The challenge with the solution overviews, and we would need to get feedback from you guys on some more of the specifics, and I think we can handle that in a questionnaire that you're going to be getting here shortly. We also we're at the top of the hour here, so I'm hesitant to spend too much time in questions. Are there 1 or 2, Petar, that you've got at
the... there was one that came in earlier, which was around code profiling, and does code profiling also come under performance engineering? If yes, which tools help out? And can performance testers having no development background be trained on this to do so? Interesting.
So, yeah. I mean, I know you've got a lot of experience with that, and I've got experience on it from a little bit of a different angle.
You're right.
To me, that almost sounds like, we could have a whole separate webinar on that one, maybe.
Agreed. Since going into performance code profiling and diagnostics underneath it, and HPE has a great tool for that. Definitely go into a lot of detail on that. But to answer the question, yeah, I think it is part of performance engineering. It's about, that's the part that goes into, once you're identifying a problem, knowing what makes up that problem so you can solve it. And that's where that code profiling comes in to say, hey, you're spending X amount of time in this loop or this thread. Why is this piece being executed 400 times when it was only meant to run twice? I've actually ran into that a few times. So it's definitely part of the discipline. And yes, perf testers that have no development background can be trained on it. But it does help if you have, let's say, the acumen that wants to actually learn and go deep diving on your own for it. At least that's my experience on that.
Yeah, and I would second your opinion of yes. And the thing that becomes interesting to me is, as we're all working in different environments, what falls into performance engineering, and I remember many experiences where, hey, we have a performance or even just a regular production incident. We're getting pulled in because we're the guys who can roll up the sleeves and find and fix the issues fairly quickly. how we do that. Sure, code profiling is going to be a big piece of that. But I guess, Petar, and I know you and I have had this conversation before, but, what is, in performance engineering? Performance kind of being one of the easy ones. Functional pieces also become parts of the issue. You can also think about things like user experience as another one, and then security often pulls in. So again, trying to put it into that bucket of, hey, it's just kind of the performance pieces. No. And again, when I think about defining it, it's throughout, it's early, and it's part of the culture. So again, code profiling. I also have had the opportunity to chase a number of issues that, when you talk about code profiling, yeah, you think about the one code base that maybe you're used to using, but now the complexity of, whether you're talking about distributed or remote services and, all the other complexities that get introduced, that code profiling can become a much bigger deal than just what it used to be of, a client-server-like architecture. So anyway, Petar, did you say there was one more in there that we want to highlight?
Yeah, there was another related to this one. Basically, similar to the fact that they're saying that different organizations say they're implementing performance engineering, but when you detail it out, they really aren't. They're saying that they're using HP Load Runner for performance testing, and they do analysis, but without making use of the diagnostic tools, and they just correlate the server logs and the metrics and share with the customer. And they're saying, is that classified as performance engineering? I'd say it's a subset, but it's not the superset.
It's interesting. I know some of us, as practitioners in this area, have floated around kind of a maturity model, which, I just, got a little sick in my mouth. But, I don't ever want to go back to, oh, you're here on this spectrum or you're here in this maturity model. But I think, as we as practitioners, we can kind of identify, hey, here's kind of things that you might be doing if you're starting in the performance engineering path, and then here's kind of where the next kind of steps could go. So with that definition, I think, you're probably doing performance testing. Maybe you're starting to go down that path of adopting some other performance engineering practices. But, again, I think it's a very healthy conversation of, how do you define performance engineering, and what is that path? It is a journey. All of us, I know, have had that journey experience, and, what are the right capabilities to pull in when, but in my mind, it also is heavily based on a culture and interacting with the people, which, Petar, one of the takeaways I had from your war story was, and again, it's historically the blame game. Well, how do we get around that, and what did that look like? So it's much bigger than just, here's a couple tools, go and run with it. But those are just my thoughts. Paul, I don't know, do you have any thoughts on that question?
No, I think you guys covered it well. I would say it is performance engineering, but it could be much better, much more efficient, and much improved by using the other tools. So I would say it's a form, like a subset, I believe someone said.
Outstanding. Well, I think, unfortunately, we are going to have to wrap this up. This is all being recorded. It will be available. I encourage you to become a member of this Performance Engineering SIG. Want to go ahead and continue the conversation, get you participating and contributing if you wish. But I guess, on behalf of Vivid Worldwide, I'd like to thank you, Petar, for participating, as well as Paul, and for Chris for his contributions. And again, unfortunately, he had a family medical emergency, but again, that is the priority that we all like to operate on. So thank you for attending today's webinar. Just a reminder, this is going to be available as a recording on our website. The slide deck is also going to be posted there. It may take a few days, but you will get an email with those links as well. If you want to learn any more information, here's the URL. And my name is Todd DeCapua. Again, thank you very much for participating. Look forward to speaking with you all soon.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you.